So again, this is the free trial environment, with a limited environment where you can search for specific risk. But again, we're focusing here on the open source investigations. You can click on Start Search. As I was explaining earlier, we've also included in this trial the direct risk indicators, right? Sanctions, PEPs, adverse media, state-owned entities, high-risk addresses, enforcement actions, indicators here in network, right? So as I was discussing earlier, we're not only just screening the entity itself, we're trying to find associated risks as well, right? So just like the example I mentioned earlier. So you can start your investigation here. In advanced search settings, you can add, person, company, vessel, aircrafts, aliases. Useful, like I said earlier, if you have an organization that is spelled differently in another language, you can place it here. And specific countries are coverage is global. I'll go ahead and just type in an entity while we're at it here. So if you were to, for example, use a risky example here, you can type in Drex Technologies, click on advanced, click on search here, and this is what it's doing right now. So it's summarizing the entire risk profile based on the indicators that we found. All right. So the initial search here, if you go into indicators, as it loads here, now it found direct connections to sanction hits, just like your search here, right? To this organization. It found country watch lists. It found connections to Panama Papers, specific enforcement actions, right? And connections to political exposure as well, and risky political exposure, as a matter of fact. But instead of going through, all of this, you can, and then looking at every single detail, you can just look at the summary, right? And create a report based on the findings. Again, our tool here is summarizing the risk it found and associating directly to Drex Technologies in this case. The second thing it's doing here is this is where OSINT comes in, okay? So we found the summarization for the direct risk we found on the indicators. But as an extra step, we are doing an open source intelligent investigation on Drex Technologies, and we're finding additional sources of information to come up with a risky profile summary, right? We found individual risks, and you can find your web links here. So let's say for a moment that I were to use our prior example. And again, like I said, we got specific explicit approval to use this example, but this is the story I was telling earlier. We are going to screen for prior to IPO. This is an organization that was essentially created to market the share, the sale of shares of privately held shares. And but what we found here is in the live web summary, you find a connection to a company called Late Stage Asset Management. That it typically in your normal screening search, right? The sanctions, PEPs, enforcement actions, you would find no direct risk in the matches, right? What we found, however, is through our OSINT search, a direct connection to this company called Late Stage Management. And Late Stage Management, and I think it's, if I can spell it here, Late Stage Asset Management here. See, and click on here. We're going to find direct risk, right, for direct ownership risk to Marcelo Fulano that has been indicted, right? The organization has been indicted, and this is your direct risk association. So OSINT here was able to, understand the connection using the open source investigation to this company called Late Stage Asset Management and connecting it to direct risk, right? All right. Well, we can move on to our